So far in this series, you've heard CSS preprocessors, specifically one called SASS, mentioned several times. Now, what a CSS preprocessor does is allow us to use logic inside of our CSS. What you've accomplished so far in your CSS pretty much maximizes what you can do with the syntax, but we've already hit on several limitations of CSS on its own. For one thing, we're ending up repeating ourselves a lot. So if we look at our code, you can see that we use some of the same colors in different places, for example, here and here. We use the same selectors, like here. For the A tag, we're having to write snippet attribution many times over, but it seems like maybe we should only have to use it once. And in other places, we're having to double up on our selectors when we're specifying a selector within another selector. Now, it's not so bad right now, but as our CSS gets longer, it becomes easier to make mistakes if we change the name of a class, for example. Or let's say we want to change a color, and we use that color in several different places. Now, we can assume that if we're using the same color in different places, that if we change that particular color, we're going to change it across the board. But in some cases, we're going to be using that color for different reasons, and we might want to change it some places, but not others. The way our syntax works right now, colors don't have any meaning. They're these hexadecimal values. We can't even tell what the color is without an IDE to give us a preview. And this says nothing about the meaning at all. For example, is this a standard gray background color that we should use on all elements with a negative color scheme? We have no idea. And finally, one of the more recent reasons why we've talked about possibly using a CSS preprocessor is to allow us to do calculations inside of our CSS. So we were looking at our p tags here, and the font size was 14 pixels, and we were changing it over to REMs in order to allow this font to be resizable by the user of the browser. Unfortunately, the transition to REMs means that the values are no longer as intuitive. So instead of 14 pixels, it's 0.875 REMs. But if we use a CSS preprocessor, we can calculate that. So we can still use the number 14, but have it translate into REMs before it hits the browser. So even though there are a lot more reasons to use a CSS preprocessor, these are the few that we want to address now by shifting over to using one. 1, we want to reduce repetition. 2, we want to add meaning to some of our values. And 3, we want to be able to do calculations right in our CSS.